Hey, what's up, comrades? Hope everyone's doing great. I found season 2 of Trapped in Another World with my cell phone. This anime is kind of dumb, but it does have some fan service, and it's like lighthearted and fun enough that I'm like, yeah, man, sounds good. All right, so quick recap of season 1. Oh, before we start, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Okay, so quick recap of season 1. So a guy gets killed by accident, and God's like really sorry about it. So he sends him to a different world and says, "You can have like, what do you want?" And the kid's like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, like cheats and stuff. And he's like, "Oh, could I just have my cell phone and it actually works, and then I can do stuff with it like a normal cell phone?" And God's like, "Yeah, no problem. That sounds fine." And it'll just be perpetually charged by like the magic of lightning or whatever. So he goes and he develops a harem. There's a princess he gets engaged to who's 12. The main character, Toya, is 15, so that's not too crazy, I guess. But then these like older ladies, I think they're twins. They might just be sisters. One's like a punchy girl, and then one's like a magic girl with big breasts. And that's important because, again, this is like, it's that kind of show. So like breast size comes up more often than you'd think. So the princess, she's 12, so obviously she is not fully developed. And then the punchy girl has like B cups, but then the magic girl has like D cups, and then there's like a samurai girl from like the Japanese land because it's like a Dragon Quest style RPG world. She also has pretty big boobs. Anyway, that's important because by the end of the season, they're all engaged to him, and he has his like little harem going. He also, there's the fairy lady who kind of like is the perpetuator of like the main story arc, which is she's looking for these like teleportation circles, and these teleportation circles lead to these Gardens of Babylon or whatever. And once they kind of find that, Toya talks with this lady from like 5,000 years ago who's using some sort of like clairvoyance magic. She's also from a different world. To like be able to talk to him in real time by knowing how he's going to respond. And she tells the story about these like Friezas or something that are going to come and like destroy the world, and then they're going to like disappear one day, and then they might come again. Anyway, so that's the whole thing. Anyway, so she developed this like Babylon, I think is what she calls it, the floating city of Babylon. And then she split it up into, I want to say 5 or 6 different locations. And so if he can find all of them, he can bring them back together. And that way, if the Friezas ever come back, then they'll be able to destroy them and whatnot. And then, he also gathers, like, the princess's bodyguards come and be his maids. There's, like, an old man maid or butler that takes care of his giant mansion of a house. He goes and, like, there's, like, little adventures. Like, every episode is, like, 2 or 3 little mini adventures. So they'll, like, rescue some people, or, like, fight slimes, or they're, like... And again, he's, like, a 15-year-old Japanese boy, so he's very, like, nervous about anything. Like, one of the girls wants to, like, hold hands, and he gets, like, very embarrassed by the whole situation. And then, like, when the princess, like, kisses him, he's super embarrassed about it, too, and then they all want to kiss. And at the end of the season, he meets this white-haired boy with a scarf named End, I want to say, or Engt, or something like that. We're just going to call him End for now. And he seems very mysterious, and he's using money that doesn't exist in this world, and he just seems like completely out of place, much like Toya, but not as like more strangely out of place than Toya, even though Toya's from like a totally different world and whatnot, which this kid also might be. Okay, so I think that's the important stuff. There's like hijinks, and it's a lot of like, ooh, oh. I love you, Toya, but I can't admit it. It's, bullshit like that. Or like the girls' like clothes start to melt off because they fight slimes, and Toya gets like the nosebleed. Oh, also, Toya like subdues 2 of the greatest summons in the whole world, like the white tiger king and the black turtle snake king, like Genbu. Okay, so season 2 picks up. Episode 1 is just kind of like, it's not even a recap. It's just like, hey, here are the characters. Here's where they're at. They're engaged, and the princess like calls them out and says, "I hope you all like really want to be engaged to my Toya because she's like the bottom bitch, I guess. I think that's what you call it when they're prostitutes. Like she's in charge, even though she's 12. She's clearly the youngest. She is like the head of the harem, and and then the king. They go and tell the king that they're getting engaged, and he could not be happier. And he's like, "Oh, 4 women, high fives all around." And the mom's like, "Oh, tee hee hee." Everyone's like very cool with everything. Anyway, there's also this group. There's like this friendly family they run something. I can't remember. I thought it was a bakery, but maybe it's like a bathhouse. Anyway, so Toya like turns it into like a Japanese style, like a very fancy Japanese style hot spring. And then, there's like, they have a hot spring section. And this is this is where the princess like calls out the girls, and it's a lot of like shots of their breasts. Yes, the show is very fan servicey, but the quality of fan service is, again, it's like nothing about this show like really stands out. It's like it's like eating grits without scrimps, maybe a little bit of cheese on there, where it's like, I just need like a quick breakfast that's like comfortable and warm, and you eat it and you feel pretty good and you're like satisfied. That's how I feel about this show. Like, there's something about it where I'm like, oh, you know what you should have for breakfast? Cheesy grits. It's just like, what do you want for breakfast? I don't know. I got some cheesy grits. Oh yeah, I like cheesy grits. Let's do that. Right? It's more like that. That's how this show is. It's like everything about it's like, oh yeah, okay, I'm digging it. But like when I'm not watching the show, I never think about it. It took me 2 seconds to like remember everything once the show started, but I literally forgot the show existed until I was going through like my list of like check on updates of like second and third seasons and whatnot for shows. So yeah, so that's the first episode. It just kind of like reintroduces all the characters, like with their kind of background, motivation, their magic. We have like a little fight scene. It's very adorbs. So the second season starts with the characters going on an adventure. So at some point in the first episode, the fairy ladies like they kind of talk about their deal where he's going to help her with something, and she's going to help him find like the rest of like Babylon or whatever. And so she's searching for that. So she found right at the end of the first episode, she finds one of these portals that will transport him to like the garden or like another part of the Babylonian structure, so he can like dock the floating islands together. So they go out to this desert to find it, and they see this like crazy manta ray looking creature attacking these like people who are running away. So they go and rescue them, and then they try to fight the creature, but none of their attacks are doing any damage, including like this mithril sword that the samurai lady got in the previous, or at the beginning of this, I think it was the previous episode. And then the end guy is just standing there, and he's like, "Oh, hey, what's up, Toya?" And Toya's like, "Oh, whoa, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm looking to for the King of the Freezes, and I saw this, so I figured I'd just take care of it." And then Toya's like, "Yeah, you can take care of it." He's like, "Yeah." So he jumps on this thing, like cracks it open, takes its like eyeball power mana crystal thingies, and smashes them together to destroy them. And then comes back, he's like, "High five!" And Toya's like, "Wow, that was really good. Wait, did you say something about King of Freezes and the world barrier being destroyed?" And En's like, "Yeah, for sure. Anyway, I gotta go." And he takes off. So that's all very sketchy. Then they check in on the people running away, and we find out that 2 or 3 of them are adventurers, and that they went to like rescue these slave women, and they're enslaved by this collar that can only be removed by the person who put it on. Unfortunately, the guy who put the collars on them is dead, so now they're kind of fucked, because now they have to just obey any command given to them. And then Toya, obviously, because it's an isekai, it's that kind of isekai, he's just like, yoink, all the collars are gone, everyone's good. And they're like, "Oh, thank you so much. But now we don't know what to do." And then the princess steps up, and she's like, "I am the princess of, I think, Belfast or whatever, or Belfort. I will send, you can go stay with us." And Toya's like, "Yeah, you can stay at our mansion, we'll figure out what to do with you." So he teleports them. One of his like main abilities is this teleportation thing. Oh, and something I didn't hit in the recap is the magic system is very interesting in that everybody like specializes in a certain kind of magic, or you're born knowing certain kinds of magic, and then Toya just knows like he's mastered at like all the magics, I guess, including null magics. And null magics are just like everything that's not elemental based, like teleportation, which is really, really rare. Anyway, okay, so then they proceed forward, and there's just desert. So the fairy lady like casts some giant wind spell and reveals like this ruins with this giant crazy like dome looking thing, which Toya walks up to. He then enters, sees a teleportation circle, hits that, and goes up to another one of these parts of Babylon. And then he meets Rosetta, who's this orange-haired like robo-maid chick. Now the robo-maids are just like hot women who are very horny, as per designed by the original creator of them. And they always have this ridiculous test to make sure that the individual is like the correct person to like take control of the place. And it was like a big deal in the first season. There was Francesca or Cheska, who's this green-haired one, and he had to like guess her panty color or something. And it was obviously she's not wearing panties. And then this Rosetta girl has like the same test, and he's like trying to like use all these spells to figure out what kind of panties she has, what color. And in my head, I'm like, dude, she's not wearing panties. Like, I don't understand. Like, this happened once, but it was so obvious it was just going to keep happening. Anyway, so eventually he uses some power to like look under her skirt and sees like her pussy. So obviously she's wearing no panties. He says transparent, but I think they're just no panties. So fun. And so then she's like, "Oh, correct. Now you'll be my new master." And then they like make out. That's how he like to become master. You have to transfer DNA through kissing. So they do that, and then she shows him this workshop where he can kind of create or reproduce anything that his imagination come up with. He can like place like he has like this stupid like gun sword thing, and he puts it on the workshop, and then like you can like modify it very easily, in Photoshop or whatever, and then it will like create whatever out of the materials. So he makes his gun blade bigger, and then he gets everyone together, and they like dock everything together, and they have like a chit chat about that. And of course, the robot maids are like being very lewd in that regard. Well, they head back. Now that this is done, they head back to the home base, and like the adventurers are like bowing to him and being like, "Oh, my lord, my king!" And he's like, "I'm not king yet. Calm down," right? Because he's gonna marry the princess, so he'd probably be king once that goes down. Because she has no, I don't think. At some point in this episode, she was like, "My sister," and I'm like, I thought that was her cousin, but I don't know. But it doesn't matter. Girls, so the boy's gonna take over because that's how this works, and everyone's down with it. High fives all around. So. And then they're just like trying to figure out what to do with these women because they don't have any skills because they were literally just slaves. They can't fight or whatever. And then we see them like out in the garden hanging out. So maybe they'll just be gardeners for this estate. I don't know. Toya in the third episode. What happens? So there was a whole thing before where they're members of this like adventurers guild or whatever, and everyone's gotten their red card except for the princess who's only got a blue card, which I guess is lower. So they go on like a crab hunting date. But before that, we learn that Toya has invested in like a maid cafe / library so that he can employ all the slave girls who are now not slaves anymore and have them just like work at this library. So they're doing that, and then the adventurers who were like with them, who rescued them, they're employed as guards for the cafe, and it's very popular. So when Toya and the princess are getting a quest to kill a giant crab, the guild lady recognizes him and says, "Oh, are you the one at the library cafe?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's me." And she's like, "Would you mind getting this book series?" And he's like, "Sure, why not?" And then as they're walking off to go do the quest, the princess is like, "You do know what that book series is about?" And he's like, "I have no idea." And she's like, "Yaoi!" And he's like, "Nani desu ka?" For those who don't know, yaoi is boy love. It's not gay at all. In fact, it's mostly for women. It's like, it's lewd / it's kind of any romantic stuff. It can be erotic. It can be just like very tense romantic situations between like rivals or friends or whatever. It's always like beautiful men with long hair. It's very like otame, but instead of having like a girl as the protagonist, it's a guy, and it's usually two men. Yaoi. And there's that the most popular anime that I can recall that involves this trope is Yuri on Ice, which is about two ice skaters. Anyway, so he's like, "Oh, I'm really not into that stuff," and that becomes like a running gag, which this show is not really funny, but again, everything about this show is just like, I like watch it and my brain shuts off a little bit and then it's over and I was like, I enjoyed that. So they kill the crab monster, and Toa learns more magic because one of the guard, like the kid, so the adventurers who are protecting the slave girls are like an older guy, an older woman, and a younger guy, like a teenager, I think he's supposed to be. And he's like, "Oh, my grandpa had gravity magic, but it wasn't very good." And so Toya somehow just like from talking to him learns it, and then he's able to use it like very well to like crush things, and it's very impressive. So the princess becomes a red card adventurer or whatever, and then they buy the book series, and then when they're talking to the guild lady, Toya's like, "Is there any other book series?" And then she goes and gets like her yaoi fan club from the which is like all the other guild mistresses who work there, and they give them like a huge list. And then the princess also reveals that the writer of like a lot of these series is this other princess in this other kingdom who goes under a pseudonym, and no one really knows that she writes this stuff except like the Princess of Belfast, who's the wife or the fiance. So he's like, "Okay, cool, I'm gonna go check that out." What he says, "Hey, you want to go on an adventure with me and like get all these books from over there?" And she's like, "Yes." And then he just goes by himself. Whatever. So he's out there and he's talking to the book lady seller in like this other kingdom, and he gets a bunch of these books, and then he's like gathering them up, and he's also buying other books because he's like, "I don't want my whole thing to be like a yaoi cafe." So I need to get like other books for this library cafe thing. So he's getting all that put together, and the there's a blonde lady who's like, oh, do you have the final volume of like this series? And then the bookseller lady's like, oh yeah, that guy just bought the last copy. And then they go back and forth, and she's like, I'll tell you what, if you give me that book, or let me buy that book, I will sign all the copies of like these other volumes. And he's like, why would I want that? She's like, because I am the author. And then he's like, oh, you're Princess Riri or whatever. And she's like, who told you about that? No one knows about that. And he's like, huh. So he summons his fiance, the other princess, and they like chit chat and have a good conversation. And meanwhile, he just makes a copy in his fucking forge of this book and is like, here you go. I also am such a good guy that I went and paid the bookseller for this book that they didn't own and didn't sell to you. What a nerd. Anyway, he finds out that they head back, and then the adventure kid is like, or teenager is like, he wants to get better and he wants to get good, and then Toya realizes that he's in love with one of the slave girls, and the slave girl's in love with him. Oh, precious. So he hooks him up with the city guard, since he's like the king and is like, or he's like the future king. He's like king consort or whatever it's called. Not yet, because they're not married, but you know, eventually. Which she's like 16 and he's 18 or something. Something real sketch. So okay, yeah, and then there's just like some chit chat about random stuff. Oh, and then he bumps into the merchant guy that he's super close friends with, and he tells him that he finished like the sexy Chinese like outfit for him that he gives to the Sudanari girl, who's the punchy girl, and then she's all like embarrassed, and she's like, oh, and then they like, she almost falls trying to wear heels, and then they like hold each other close and pawashas. And then the last thing we find out in this episode is that the princess is now writing a whole series about two princesses fighting over like a guy. So it's just a story of him essentially. Toya heads to a nearby empire to find some books. And when he gets there, it's under attack. Oh no, what happens? He stuns some guys with his giant gun knife / sword knife thing. Dependent on his mood, I guess. And the guy tells him that there's a coup de grace. So he heads into the castle, finds the princess of the empire, rescues her and her bodyguard. They then go to rescue the king, who's under attack from a general who has not one but two magic items. One that like absorbs magic and one that one that blocks magic and one that blocks physical attacks. And then he's made a pact with the demon, and the demon absorbs magical powers. So the princess and the bodyguard are like, oh, we're so tired. And then Toya, who's Superman, is like, oh, I feel slightly weakened. So then he does some magic trickery, like, because he can't cast spells on this guy and he can't hit him with physical attacks. So he uses like that slip spell, which is the most awesome spell that's ever existed, clearly. And it causes the guy to slip and fall, and then he uses illusion magic to make it look like bugs are crawling all over him, and in a very comedic way. And then he gates everybody out of there. And then they chit chat with the king, or no, then he gets back, and the princess clearly wants to bang Toya, because of course. And then the Belfast princess, his fiance, comes up, and she's like, oh, I can tell you want to fuck my boyfriend. Well, we can talk about that in my room. Let's go. What a fantasy. What a fantasy. This lowly girl who just is like, this is my man, but if he wants to fuck other women, I love it. And you're like, cool. That is not a single woman who's ever existed on the face of the planet ever in any circumstance. But hey, awesome. This fucking show. So then he goes and talks to the king, and the king's like, oh, I'm pregnant. And then Toya's like, that's great news. And he's like, oh, I really want you to be king after me. And it's like, nah, but if you have a son, he's got to be king. He's like, yeah, hopefully it's a daughter, and then you can still be king. And Toya's like, okay, I guess so. I really don't want to be king, but it is what it is. And good for the king. It's like he's on his second or third kid, depending on... it was hard to tell if the princess has a sister or if it was her cousin from the previous episodes and such, because I don't remember ever seeing her before, but I kind of remember from the first season she had a sister, so that's probably what it is. So anyway, and so Toya comes up with a plan to retake the empire from this guy, and so he gets to work on that like secretly, and then he's like, all right, in the morning we're gonna, oh, then the king gets better because he casts healing magic and sticks a healer on him. So he tells he tells the emperor, hey, we're going to take your kingdom back tomorrow. We'll just go take it out. So he sends all the girls and his like super summons to like fight the army and just decimate them. And then he goes straight to the man himself to like fight the demon and the demon summoner guy. We also find out that the guy he rescued at the very beginning is the crown prince, or maybe not the crown prince, but he's a prince. And the princess at some point said she was the third princess, but we don't meet these other like princesses, so they're just not important, I guess. Excuse me, I'm kind of sick. Anyway, and he uses his cell phone magic to find him, and apparently he's fine. Like I don't know why this character's in the show. Like, the writing in this is not good, and this is a prime example. So let's talk about it. The prince he rescues the prince, who could just be a generic soldier, who's presented as a generic soldier at the beginning, right? Just to get information. That's fine. So if he rescues a generic soldier tells him what's happening. That character exists for a specific purpose, and then we leave. So now, later on, she's like, oh, I'm worried about, like, first of all, I'm the third princess, which means there's two other princesses, and then this guy who, I don't know, maybe he's the only prince, which is kind of a big deal. But also, it's not really a big deal because nothing happens about it. They literally are like, she's like, oh, before you go and invade, I'd just like to know if my brother's okay. And he's like, what's your brother look like? So he does this little cute thing where he puts his head on someone else's head and like sees the kid. And he's like, I know who that is. And he looks it up, and then he's like, hey, Emperor, where's this at? On his like Google Map app. And the king's like, oh, that's at this guy's house. He's very loyal to me, so the prince is fine. And everyone's like, awesome. And that's it. So they go do the fight, and he uses his newfound gravity magic to decimate the demon, because even though he's like immune to magic, he's not immune to like 5 billion tons of weight being knocked into his head, which that's what happens with Toya's sword. So the demon's defeated, and the guy's like, I can't believe you defeated a demon lord. Blah, 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 blah. And then Toya's like, all right, whatever, man. And he's like, you still can't beat me. I'm still invincible. And so Toya, at some point, he went back to the workshop with Rosetta and created like a sealed glass box, and then he put like this really stinky slime that was dead in there and let it like rot overnight. And so then he just gates the guy inside the box, because again, the gate is not on you. It's like he just has him like fall into it. And then the guy like passes out from like the rancid scent, and then he like gets in the box and takes the immunity stuff off, and victory. So then we go back, and everyone's like happy, and we see the prince for like one more second holding hands with his sister in that like typical way they do in anime. Not in like a sexual way, but like, oh, I'm so happy, big brother. And then the king uses Toya's magic cell phone to like announce that there was a rebel faction in the military, but it's been taken over, or it's been destroyed, and so everyone can live in peace and happiness again. And everyone's like, hooray! And that's it. So the whole thing with the prince was, again, like if that had just been a random guard and we not talked about it ever again, that would have been better than being like, oh, I'm really worried about my brother. Okay, he's fine, good, and that's it. Now, maybe in future episodes the prince will come up, but this show like runs through characters. Like, for example, in the whole Beast Kingdom thing is like, that was like super important for like a minute, like 2 episodes, I think, and then it's like never brought up again. And one of the Beast girls was even in like the opening, it was in like the intro scroll. So you're like, oh, is one of his love interests going to be like this fox girl? And you're like, nope, not important. She was in 2, maybe 2.5 episodes, if that, because these episodes sometimes are like split into like 2 or 3 little stories. So, yeah, there you go. Anyway, the next step in Toya's journey is, of course, to get engaged to the princess of the empire that he just saved. There's a little meet and greet with the emperor and the king of Belfast, and they talk about all the great things, and now they want to reward him, and he's like, oh, I don't need a reward, it's no big deal. And then they have like a conversation about how about you marry my daughter, and then we can forge like an alliance, and yada yada yada. And there's a whole thing about like, oh, excuse me, I'm sick. Oh, I don't know, what's that going to do? And then some rando blonde guy is like, oh, that's very good. So you don't want to be showing favor to one nation or other because you're so strong. You could like really influence other nations, and they might feel threatened, and they might start wars. So you marrying the empress's or the emperor's daughter is like a great thing to do. And he's like, oh, I guess that works. Yeah, she's cute, so whatever. So another 12-year-old in my repertoire. Fuck it. And then he's like, I don't know, do you want to marry me? And then Princess of Belfast is like, oh yeah, we already talked about it. We had like a whole shindig, which I mentioned in the previous episode, that they were like, ooh, you like this guy too because he rescued you. Awesome. So she's like, yes, I want to marry him. And so, yay, they get engaged. And then so that he can officially be announced as like the engager, the fiance of the 2 princesses, he needs to have some sort of title. And he's like, oh man, I want a title. And they're like, so we're going to secede some land between the 2 kingdoms to you, and then you're going to have your own kingdom. And he's like, oh man, you don't have to do that. They're like, no, it's empty space. Like, fuck it, whatever. It's just sitting there, not doing shit. And he's like, oh, okay. So yeah, you're going to be the king of whatever. And he calls it Brunhilde, which is like from Norse mythology, right? Which all the fiancés are like very impressed with. Fucking hell. And then he's like, all right, cool. And then someone mentions like, hey, maybe we should move there. And he's like, but like nani desu ka? Or no, what is why? Well, it's weishima in Chinese. Anyway, why? Is his question. And they're like, oh, because we don't want to show favoritism, so we'll keep the mansion here, and it'll be like an embassy from the kingdom of Brunhilde. But we need to like actually move there so that there's not like two princesses living there, living in like one kingdom or the other. Like there's some sort of issue with that. And he's like, oh, okay, makes sense. So then he's like, okay, well now we're gonna build a castle. How do we do that? And Rosetta, the automaton from the workshop part of Babylon, the flying islands. I know it's so confusing. Shows up and she's like, I can make a castle in 3 days. I just need materials and I need this. And Toya's like, oh my gosh, that's so much stuff. How are we gonna get all that stuff? And then the new princess is like, oh, there's like an abandoned castle in our kingdom that you can just like totally do whatever you want with. And she's like, I will absorb it all and then make it happen. And then they do, and it's a beautiful castle with massage chairs and a pool room and air hockey and all this fucking shit. So yay! Then Toya puts in like this like teleporter device, and it's essentially you just have to like touch the pad on the wall and just say where you want to go, and then it will gate you there. And so him and one of his maids gate over there, and she's like, oh, it's a letter from the king. He wants to see you, the king of Belfast. So he goes over there and he gets introduced to another king, and this is the king whose daughter is the perv who writes the yaoi fiction that he met that one time. And he's like, oh, I wanted to meet you since you're like a new king and you're going to be involved with all these politics and whatnot. And he's like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. And he's like, it's too bad I can't marry my daughter to you. And he's like, oh shit, that chick is crazy, hell no. He doesn't say it out loud, but he's like, ah. And then the king's like, but she's already like promised to someone else, so whatever. And Toya's like, oh, thank God. Fucking yaoi pervs. Anyway. So then, but they want to have like a party because kings like to party, and it's for quote unquote diplomatic relations. So they can all get together and like chit chat and whatnot. So then Toya goes and sets up the castle. At some point, he's like, "Oh man, I need more security. I already set up the whole castle to be like to knock anyone out who uses offensive magic." So what's next? Next is the shinobi lady from previously, who's from the kingdom where the samurai lady and fiance is from. She shows up and she's like, hey, I want to work for you. And he's like, oh, what about whatever clan you were from before? And she says, it's been disbanded. Like the new ruler who took over the kingdom over there is like a real asshole. And then our leader was like, hey, I don't agree with all this stuff. And so he took all his land away and like essentially we're like landless people. So we're all here. And Toya's like, ooh, how many of you are there? And she's like 67, and including children. And he's like, oh, that's not so bad. And then they have a conversation about like, why I can't afford to like hire everybody to like guard the castle or do whatever. And she's like, oh no, we shinobi, we have lots of talents. We can like run stalls and fucking build things and shit as well. Sure, why not? Fuck it, this anime. That is the thesis for this entire anime is YOLO, fuck it. No, fuck it, YOLO. Like, whenever anything comes up, it's always like, oh man, what are we gonna do about this? Fuck it, YOLO. Victory. Did I pause this? Hell no. Good. Okay. So then they all start constructing a town, and then the leader of this clan is like very wise, and he becomes like the chief steward, it seems, for Toya. So he advises him to build like roads and how to like do mercantile stuff and how to build like shops and all this stuff. And we get like a montage of all this stuff coming, and he's like building highways to like the other kingdoms, and then the guy's like inspecting the fields and stuff. It's pretty cool. It's all pretty chill, good stuff, right? It's almost like the entire like Slime Diaries thing, like the 5-episode OVA. Or maybe it was not. Maybe it wasn't an OVA, but in like a 2-minute montage. And then we go to the new princess, and she's kind of sad because she doesn't have an engagement ring yet, but she's also trying to find like a place for herself. And the other fiancés are concerned. They're like, "Oh, are you having a hard time like adjusting? We're there for you, sisterhood, yada yada." Like women acting like no woman has ever acted on the planet Earth under any circumstance of all time. Like the greatest fantasy of this show is not the harem. It's that all these women, it's the harem, right? It's not that all these women are in love with a single guy. That happens like all the fucking time. It's that all these women are like getting along without any problem. That is the greatest fantasy of this whole thing. Like, what the fuck? Get out of here. Like, they're so down to just be like sisters. Like, never. That never happens. Ever. Especially over a man. Anyway, it's quaint. It's like a nice chill thing to watch. Okay, so then, so they build that up. Oh, yeah. And so she brings him like lunch, and they have a cute little lunch. And he talks about how cute she is, and she gets embarrassed. Obviously, she blushes like a Talkie from the Talkie app. And then he throws like the party. The party goes well, and he has like a fireworks show afterwards with the Rosetta and Chessa. What is it? Francesca. What did she go by in this? Maybe Chessie. Anyway, they throw firework bombs down, and everyone's like super impressed. And then he's standing with like the second princess, and that's when he gives her engagement ring, and he's like, "Sorry, I didn't get this to you earlier." And then he like holds her hand, and she blushes. Good fucking stuff. Episode 6 slams a lot of stuff in. Like, move pretty quick. So we start off, and they're all searching around for an entrance to another Garden of Babylon or whatever. And Toya finds it. He, like, stumbles into it, goes up to it, meets this super boobalicious, like, pink-haired robot who makes him grab her breast for his test, and then kisses him. And there's, like, no chatty chat, nothing. It's just like bam, 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 bam. And now he's at the Alchemist, and then the Alchemist sector. And so Alchemist sector is just really like a hospital, and it's got all sorts of tinctures and potions and kind of like beds and things to cure and heal. And the robot mentions that they can like grow legs and all this crazy magical bullshit. And then he's like, "Oh, show me the medicines." And she's like, "Here's an aphrodisiac, 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 aphrodisiac." And he's like, "Oh," this fucking show. Anyway, then we get those combined. Again, no preamble, no kind of like working on it or mentioning it. It's just like, okay, now all three of them are together. And the fairy lady is disappointed that they still haven't found the library, which is the one she's looking for. And then the 12-year-olds are upset because the robot's got giant breasts. Even the girls with big breasts, like Magic Twin and Samurai Girl, are like kind of upset. And then Toya decides he's going to study magic some more. So he gets a book. He gets a whole bunch of books for his library. And then one of the books he gets has a spell for flight. And so he's studying that, and he feels sick. And then the punchy girl, like, does like the lap thing with him. So he's resting on her lap talking about it. And she's like, "Could you make me fly?" And he's like, "Nah, because it's not manipulation magic. It's something bullshit. And he's like, "Wait, I could try Leviathan. I could try levitation while I fly." And so that works. They're able to fly around, and then they chit-chat for a minute. Essentially it's just like, oh, here's this girl, here's that girl. Okay, we included all the wives. Like the 12-year-olds are there for a minute. It sounds much more seedy when I say 12-year-olds. He's 15, which is still shady. I mean, when I was in high school, I couldn't imagine dating like a middle school girl. I think I knew of somebody who was doing that, but they might have been like a freshman, so it was like much less skeezy. But still, it's like, that's a huge gap, man. I don't know. Whatever, in the grand scheme of things. It's not like some 25-year-old dating like a 16-year-old or something. That's much more like erotic wish fulfillment kind of bullshit. Mostly in teen romantic books, to be completely honest. There's a lot of that shady shit. Like Edward Cullen's like 100 and something years old, and he's grooming this like 16-year-old girl. The fuck? Anyway. Back to this. So they do flight magic, and then okay. And then then he practices flying some more. He gets a call from Aphrodite, the love goddess, and she's like, "Ooh, it's time to go introduce yourself to the parents of your fiancés that you haven't done that yet, like the punchy girl, the punchy girl twin." And then the samurai lady. So he goes to the samurai lady, and it's like very traditional. They're on their knees, like in a Japanese house kind of situation. And dad, the mom are like, "Oh, that's fine. Sounds good. You can marry. You can have your harem. We approve." And then they're like, and then the wife who. The samurai lady is like, "Wait, you don't have any, like, Toya, say something." And he's like, "Oh, sorry, I'm just stunned. I thought you guys would be a lot more against it, or have me like do like a duel or some crazy thing." And the dad's like, "I like that idea. Let's do that." And then the wife, or not the wife, the samurai girl's like, "No, I am an arm of Toya, and I am his protector. And so if you're gonna fight anyone, you'll fight me." And then the dad tears up and is like, "Oh, I'm so happy my daughter found such a wonderful man that she's willing to sacrifice so much for." Ooh, and it's like, that's adorbs. So yeah. Oh, so then he heads to like the small farming village where the twins are from, and I think their parents are dead, because we meet like the uncle and aunt, and the uncle like gets on his knee. He's like, "Wait, you're a noble?" And he gets on his like face, and he's like, "Oh, grovel, 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 grovel." And then the aunt is like, "Oh, don't mind him. He had some like weird traumatic event with a noble a long time ago," and we don't talk any more about that whatsoever. And then we find out there's like lightning bears in the area, because one of the nephews brings it up, and so then he's like, "Oh, we'll take care of that," and he goes and kills like a whole fucking bunch of them, and then they bring him back. And like what a lightning bear is a bear that shoots lightning. They're causing lots of problems for obvious reasons. So he takes care of that problem pretty easily. And then what's the next thing that happens? And then he's trying to figure and then he's trying to figure out how to find then he goes to the workshop with Rosetta, and he's talking about building these mechs. Oh, no. Wow, so while he's at that village, after he kills the bears, he runs into that end guy again. And he's like, "End, I need to talk to you." And he's like, "What's up, homie?" And so they sit and chat, and we learn virtually no new information, but they restate that there's these freezes. They come there. The thing we do learn is that the king freeze has a core, and that the core is inside a human being or human-like creature or something, but that the freezes are looking for it, but they can't hear the reverberations of the core because the human heart like is too loud. So they just like massively slaughter people just to find this core. And it seems like they're very animalistic, as in they're just kind of doing their thing, right? It's not like they're intentionally trying to massacre whole planets. They're just like, they have like an objective, and the objective is like a core part of their programming or something. And so they're just like trying to execute on that. And then they end is, he was alive 5,000 years ago when like the last invasion occurred, and that they didn't find the core, but someone was able to like seal the protective covering of the world that kept out these creatures, and so then they all kind of disappeared back into their normal world or whatever, and that this heart thing like bounces from world to world at points. And so then they have like a very terse conversation, full terse for the show, about End's goal. His goal is to get the core, and then Toya's like, "Are you going to kill a bunch of humans?" And then he like laughs and is like, "No, I find that method to be too messy. I just sit around essentially and kill freezes until like the core jumps to a different world or whatever." And then Toya's like, "Are you an enemy or or an ally of mankind?" And like laughs it off, and he's like, "All right." And then I gotta go. And then Toya's like, "What are you?" And then End's like, "You give me way too much credit." And then he like pieces out. And so there you go. So then Toya goes to the workshop, talk to Rosetta, because they need to get these mech suits built, because they're all in the storehouse and no one knows where it's at. And he's like, "All right, let's mass produce these." And she's like, "Well, it's kind of hard because we need like a ton of like rare materials. So we got to go find those, and then I can mass produce like one a day." And she makes that sound like a problem, but I'm like, what? That sounds awesome. Like if like if America could build a nuke a day, I'm sure they would do it. Like I'm sure they'd be over the moon. They could create unmitigated disaster for humanity and the planet, one at a time, as a day by day. Like, so you're like, "Oh, these super mech suits that can fight these like invulnerable creatures, but you can only make one a day, so it's very slow." It's like they're not like here on our doorstep. Like you saw one time, maybe weeks ago, like whatever. Anyway, they also make some this whole thing is like, I don't know if it's poorly translated, poorly written, or poorly localized, but because as part of that conversation as well, she said, he's like, "How many are there?" And she's like, "There's 6 of each type, 6 or 7 of each type." And they don't say how many types there are, but if the fact that they say types means there's at least 2, and I would assume at least 3, just by what, based on what they're saying. And so there's like, what, 3 times, it's like 18 of these things. It's like, that's pretty good, man. I mean, yeah, it's not like thousands, but anyway. And then she also reveals that they were never utilized, because by the time they got them like up and running, or I think they were utilized, but the mass production didn't really occur, because by the time they were ready to mass produce one a day, the freezes already like pieced the fuck out. So then he's like trying to figure out what to do next. And he's talking to his homies, White Tiger, like White Emperor and Black Emperor, Genku and Tiger Guy. And they're like, and they're trying to figure out how they can find more of these Babylons, because they need to find these like workshops, because that make things a lot easier. Or not the storehouse, I think, make things a lot easier. And they mention the fire goddess, or the fire god, fire empress, and he could summon her, and that she's a lot more calm and less crazy than these two. And she can summon like unlimited birds. and control them. So then the birds can go like search for these things, make things a little bit easier, make it a little quicker to find all the Babylon teleportation circles or whatnot. But just like looking around for stuff. And so he's like, all right, let's do it. So then they summon, and the Fire Empress shows up, and she's like, what up? And he's like, hey, I need your help. I want you to join forces with us. And then she looks over and sees the other two guys, and she's like, yeah, all right, fine. And he's like, what, we're not going to have to battle or anything? She's like, no, I mean, if you defeated these guys, I mean, what's the point? She is calmer. So he gives her a name, Koiku or something like that, and then turns into like a precious little phoenix firebird thing, and then summons a bunch of birds, and they head out. So I finally figured out this show's trick. It just moves at such a fast pace. Like things just happen, bam, 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 bam. You have no time to stop and think about what you're actually watching. and so nothing like really settles in, and you just have this malaise of like good feelings because there's like the pretty waifus of various types, and then they go on like fun adventures, and then the main character is just kind of a goofus. So you're just like, I'm a goofus sometimes. I get it. Anyways, this episode starts with Toya waking up in bed with his main wife slash fiance, the first princess, the 12-year-old. He's 15, so is it the worst thing ever? I don't know, man. Anyway, so they're sleeping together. He's like, and he freaks out. She wakes up, and she's like, what? We're married. What's wrong with us sleeping together? He's like, no, we're just engaged. And she's like, whatever. You spend so much time with everyone else, so this is my time to spend with you. And she gives him a kiss on the cheek and runs off. Credits roll. So next we're at a forest, and the girls are Nikke Goddess of Victory all over the monsters in this place, while the commander slash Toya just stands there and like watches and feels kind of bad that he's unneeded and unnecessary for his waifus to just beat the shit out of everyone. They're now joined by the second princess, the princess of the other king, the Empire Kingdom, who fights with two daggers like that Zia chick from Tales of Cold Steel. Reminds me a lot of her. So that's hot. And so he's sad about that, but then the bear friend, because remember they're looking for the Phoenix Lady summon person, told him that like, oh hey, there's a thing over here, you should go find it, so you can get another like Tower of Babylon or whatever. So they head over and get that. Oh no, and then the bear's like, look, a pyramid. So Toya goes in there, he goes up to the fortress. You know how this works. This time it's like a very lowly short chick. So big fan. She tries to hit him with a giant wrench, and then he fights her off and sees her panties twice, and because he's able to beat her it's okay, guys. She's an android. 5,000 years. 5,000-year-old. All right. So because he's able to fight her off, she kisses him, and now they have access to the hangar. Yay! We finally found the hangar. And what's in the hangar? The hangar, it's got mechs. Sweet ass. This is the mech show, I guess, sort of. So he wants to use the mechs, but ruh-roh, they're out of fuel. And you need the gas station. What's it called? The engineering bay? I don't know. There's some other thing they need to like process fuel, but then the alchemist can make her own style of fuel, I guess. But she needs ether stones, and everyone's like, what's an ether stone? And then she describes it, and someone's like, oh, you mean spell stones? She's like, sure, what the fuck you want to call it? That's what it is. And so they pull it out, and she's like, that's way too small. Anyone that's like 20 times that size. And all the girls are like, I've never seen or heard of anything that big. If there was, it'd be like billion, trillions, quadrillions of dollars. And then he's like, oh, shucks. And then one of his waifus is like, hey, why don't you just use your fucking phone and like look it up? And he's like, oh yeah, I can do that. So he does. And they find one in his territory. Who'd have thought? Anybody who's watched this show would have thought. So it's an obvious fucking thing. So they go get it. They bring it back. It's actually double the size they need for the mech. So that's great. So then she cuts it in half, and then he's able to like use it now. Rosetta, the one from the workshop, shows up, and her and the redheaded loli get into an argument about the maintenance of the thing. And then she also shows, she's like, look, I made VR simulation chambers where you can go in and practice using the mech. And so he goes in there and runs around and is like giddy as a schoolboy on Christmas, or on I don't know, finding his dad's porn stash or whatever. And then the redheaded girl, the lowly android, comes in, and they fight, and he beats the shit out of her again. And then he has a bunch of replicas of those made and takes them to the castle so everybody can practice. So all the ladies, all the waifus get to practice with the mechs, and they're all super excited about it. And then the whole kingdom, and he's like, yeah, we can only make one a day. We can now start replicating these because we got one, but we can only make one a day. And in my head, I'm like, wasn't there an issue with resources? Fuck it. Forget about it. Who cares? Nothing matters. As long as we're all having fun. So he's going to make a bunch. All right. Then the episode just like forget all that shit you just learned about. That's all done with. Now it's time to talk about something completely different. So what happens next is, and again, I'm so confused because there's three lily blonde long-haired chicks. One is the princess, his main waifu. One is her cousin, and then one is her little sister. Now, the cousin and the little sister might be the same girl because I feel like they look exactly alike, and I'm too lazy to go back to the first season to like figure out what's going on. But I'm pretty sure the first lily girl was like the Duchess' daughter, and her dad was the Duke, and the Duke is the brother of the king, and right. So the king's got two daughters who look super close in looks because one it's anime and two, I mean, that's not siblings look somewhat alike, I guess. Sometimes, usually they don't look this much alike. But so she comes running up and crying, and she's like, "You have to marry me right now." And he's like, "Nani desu ka?" And we find out from the steward, the old man who's hanging out, that there was like this asshole guy from a different kingdom who's like the first prince of the kingdom who like wants to arrange marriage with this girl, but that he's a real asshole, and there's lots of rumors about how he like physically mistreats his wives or his girlfriends or whatever, and that he's demanding to be married to this girl. And then Toya's like, we can't let that happen. So he goes and talks to his waifus, and they're like, oh yeah, we figured you'd marry your main wife's little sister anyway as part of the harem. That just makes sense. And he's like, no, that's not, damn it, that's not what I'm talking about. We got to figure out a way to like break up the old proposal. Yeah, you dumb bitches. And they're like, oh yeah, we have no idea anything about that. And so then the steward's like, yeah, it causes political problems. And then political problems, this and that. And then the androids all come in and like, we could just kill him. I can make a sniper rifle. I can poison him. I can bludgeon him to death. And he's like, no, we're not going to do that. Let's just go talk to him and figure out what's going on. And so he goes and talks to the king, and the king's like, oh yeah, we figured you'd marry her anyway as well. I was like, Jesus Christ, this girl's like 8. Now it's getting, if it wasn't like, I don't know about this, guys. Now I'm like, holy shit, man. Like, what is happening? Whatever. So, I mean, arranged marriage is arranged marriage, and people get arranged marriage at like 5, so it doesn't mean they have to be doing anything, but still. Anyway, so he talks to the king, and the king's like, oh yeah, I figured that was going to happen, but we got to figure out how to break this thing up. And he's like, you know what, whatever, I'm just going to do it. He'll just be mad at you anyway, so whatever. And then Toya's like, oh, fuck me. Why? And then the emissary shows up to like see about the proposal, see if they're ready to go with it. And before that, we learn about the second prince, who's a bastard son. He's the son of a concubine. And then we learn that like the person putting all the pressure and not allowing the first son, who's got like a very notorious background, to not be like removed from the royalty or whatever because of all his like misbehavior, is the prime minister, who's related to the queen. And the queen, obviously, that's her son. So she wants to like maintain power within her household, and so does the prime minister. And the prime minister is pretty much running the kingdom, and the king is kind of just a figurehead. So it makes it easier as well if he has this like asshole as the king, because he can just keep running the show as like his cousin or uncle or whatever. So that's all that's going down. And then we find out there's a second prince, like I said before, and that he's actually a great guy, and he's super nice, and he's fantastic. Anyway, so the emissary shows up, and then he's got a sick mom. So then the emissary shows up. And he's like, hey, I'm here to see what's going on. And the king's like, no, I'm afraid we're going to have to be like, nah, bro, it's all good. Because she's already engaged to this guy right here, Toya. And he's like, wait, are you Toya of Brunhild, Duke, whatever? And he's like, yeah. And so he bows to him, and he's like, oh, please, I really hate when people bow down to me. And he's like, no, you have teleportation magic. You have to help my mother. And you're like, oh, so you're the prince. Dun, dun, dun. And that's the end of that episode. So the continuation of the last episode, we follow through with this prince and his princely issues, and him marrying like and Toya marrying like an 8-year-old girl and stuff. So the prince like and the king and everyone, they have a discussion and like, all right, we're gonna fight against this evil king because he has slavery and all this other bull crap that's really bad and stuff. He's a really bad guy. So then Toya is sitting down with his council of waifus, and he's considering what to do next. And he's like, I got a devious plan. So then they all turn invisible and teleport back to the kingdom so they can see like the young prince, or the first prince all by himself. Or they can see the first prince for themselves. Okay. He's a real asshole. So like I said, he has slaves. He like beats up and treats women poorly. He's like bad to the people. He slaps his brother around and treats him like hot garbage and all this stuff. And we find out that the the mother of the second prince is being held captive so that he can't do anything. We also meet the prime minister who is like orchestrating a lot of this stuff, and he's a real asshole too. And then we meet the mom, who is also like a real fucking like Karen asshole lady. So it's a whole family of assholes. So then Toya follows them around invisible and like records them discussing how they're gonna like dethrone the king and kill him. And then at some point they reveal, because they're discussing it out loud to themselves, which is like terrible story writing. Isn't it great when people just reveal things that they already know to each other in secret when no one else is around? Oh, I'm so excited that our son, the first prince is actually our son, the prime minister and the queen, not actually the son of the king. Oh, ho, ho, it'll be a new family dynasty and everything will be great. Ooh, hoo, 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 hoo. And so Toya gets that recorded, so he goes and shows it to the actual king, and he's pissed. And so he calls like everybody together in the kingdom. And meanwhile, before that happens, Toya and the prince and his wife, who's going to rescue the second prince's mom, who the king actually loves, which is why she was like a concubine that was put away. I don't know why they didn't just kill her, but I guess it's to use her as leverage. So then the king is like, I am ready to step down and declare my... declare the first prince of the kingdom to be the next in line to rule. And he says the second prince's name, and he stands up and is like, all right. And then the first prince guy, who's not actually related to the king at all, is like, oh, what's going on? And the prime minister brings it up. And then the king summons Toya with like his retinue, including the tiger, the white tiger god. And they show the video that he recorded on his cell phone. Man, it makes life so much simpler when you just record everything and they don't have any rules against it. So they record that. Or they play that for the whole kingdom to see, and they're all like aghast at how wicked and evil the prime minister is. And so then the new king, who is the actual son of the king, he sends them all to be beheaded. But in reality, he sends them to like a slave quarry. Like, fucked up. So yeah, so I got what you deserved. Meanwhile, Toya and the crew, they head back, so things are great there. They solved all the problems pretty easily. They come back, and then his newest wife, the 8-year-old sister of his main wife, comes running up, and she's like, yay, I'm so glad we're married. And he's like, well, we're not married yet. I gotta wait till I'm 18, because he's 15, 16? And she's like, that's okay. We're gonna get married someday. Tee-hee, tee-hee. And then Toya's like, for a second, is like, I don't know. She's pretty young. And then he's like, fuck it. Our man. All right, everybody, it's date time. That's right. The girls are sad hippopotamus because they have not been getting the attention that they so rightfully believe they deserve. Now, let's not forget the current wife situation with Toya. He is engaged to twin sisters who are roughly 18, so whatever. He's 15. Then another girl, the samurai girl, who I'm guessing is probably 16-ish. So all good, right? I mean, it's a little young, but you know, they're all roughly the same age. The twins, it's a little odd. Maybe they're not quite 18, but still. In this world, I guess being adult means you're 12. Lord. And that's important because, dun-da-da, two of his wives are 12. And they're both princesses, various kingdoms. And then his last wife is 8 to 10. Good for him. And she seems to be the horniest of all. God damn this show. All right. Excellent. So he takes his main wife and the other older wives, the old-timey wives, who are older than him as far as I'm tracking, on a big group date. And also the other princess, the other 12-year-old princess. So they all have like a grand time, and they go eat and they cuddle and go see a movie. And at some point, some bandits come and they try to like harass them, which he's in his kingdom. So it's like, come on, man. Like, you're the Dutch. You're the duke of this place. Like, fucking, why is there already crime in your like very small kingdom? Whatever. Anyway, so they beat the shit out of them, give them the guards, go to the play, everything's great. They're all heading back after the date, and it's the horny wife, the 8-year-old. She's don't understand. Oh man, no 8-year-old has romantic feelings for anyone. I just going to throw that out there, or 10-year-old, because you haven't hit puberty yet, so those things like do not exist. You may have like vague concepts, but at this point, like everyone's really guilty for some heavy grooming behavior with this like prepubescent girl. Not that the 12-year-olds aren't also prepubescent, but I don't know. This show doesn't really get into it. It is what it is. So he goes on a solo date with the 8-year-old, and they have a grand old time just walking around, and she's calling herself the Duchess already, even though they're not married. And that comes up like several times in this episode, like more than you think, like 3 or 4 times, where they're like, "Oh, I know we're just engaged. We're like married. You don't worry about it." And he's like, "Okay, sure, I guess." The kissing stops. So I guess he's kissed everybody one time, and he's a 15-year-old boy. Then at some point, he gets a message that his mech is done, and he becomes super excited about that because, again, he's also 15 years old. So if you meet most 15-year-old boys and you're like, boobs, and they're like, yes, and you're like, mechs, they're going to be like, oh, mechs. Much more important for a 15-year-old boy in general, to be completely honest. So at least it's accurate in that regard. So we head there, and he lets the samurai girl use the mech first because she's got the lowest mana count or whatever. And so she's able to pilot. So it means everyone's able to pilot. And then he wants to pilot, but all the wives, obviously get to go first. So he's sad eponymous about that. The next thing we do is he goes to talk to Rosetta about mass producing the mechs. And she's like, oh, yeah, I can mass produce them, but we're going to run out of orichalcum. So we need to get some more. And so he's walking around town being sad, thinking about how he can get more orichalcum, even though he literally has used his cell phone to find other things like all the time with like no problem whatsoever. So I'm starting to think Toya's kind of retarded, and like I feel like we've crossed this bridge multiple times, and yet you still have qualms, or not qualms, you just have confusion. And then the 12-year-olds show up, and they're like, husband, and he's like, we're not married yet, and they're like, whatever, and he's like, oh man, this place, it's crazy. And then he tells them, like, they're like, you look sad. And he's like, oh, I'm trying to figure out where to get orichalcum from. And they're like, oh, that's a good question. It's like, you all saw him literally use this fucking cell phone to find another, like, the mana crystal, like, previous episode or 2. Like, within the week. Like, the fuck is wrong with all you people? This whole world's retarded. And then he's like, oh, wait, what about an orichalcum golem? Like, we have all that mithril from that mithril golem, and I was like, what mithril golem? I don't remember any of that shit. I guess it happened off stage, off stage left. Anyway, so he pulls the phone out and is like, phone, like, Siri, show me where the orichalcum golems are in the world. And she's like, right here and here and here. And he's like, awesome. And I was like, oh my goddamn, dude. What the fuck? And he's like, I'm gonna go. And they're like, we want to come. And he's like, all right, but I'm gonna fly. And they're like, oh, flying, I don't know about that. So they don't come. Then as he's flying to the golem, there's a town under attack by these Phazon creatures or whatever. And there's like a warrior princess, like a literal warrior princess in this literal warrior kingdom where the king is like a knight as well. And then she's like a warrior princess. Is trying to fight them, but obviously she doesn't have the capabilities to do it. Oh, also while he was at the storage unit, we find out that the workshop, they've been crafting swords and weapons out of the Phazon like crystals that they got from the last battle with the manta ray creature in the desert. And so these should be able to break through their like steely exterior or glassy exterior, which works because he has a sword and he shows up and he beats the shit out of all of them. And and then they're chit chatting and she's like getting super horny for that sword of his. And he's like, sure, you can have one. So he summons one from like his storage center with like his magical powers and hands it to her. And she gets like really turned on by this whole situation. And then she's really grateful, which makes me believe that perhaps he just proposed to her. We'll see. It would not surprise me if that's how this show rolled. Granted, the horny yaoi princess, she was like in and out, so he's not gonna like get engaged to every princess in the whole world, yet. That could always change. So, and then he continues on. He kills the orichalcum golem like off stage. So he's just standing over the golem, being like, "All right, got it." And he sends some materials to the storehouse. And then he sees this deer, and this deer's giving him like an odd look. And he's like, "It's a deer." And the deer's like, "Get it," like nods its head. And he's like, "Oh, I better follow it." So he follows it, and there's this woman with white hair who's laying on the ground, and she's all bleeding and cut up. And he's like, "Oh no, what happened? I gotta help her." And so he's that's where the episode ends. All right, so my microphone broke. And I was unaware that it was broken in a recording before I went ahead and recorded the review for episode 10 of season 2 of Trapped in Another World with My Cell Phone, or Isekai, or whatever this fucking show is called. So, this is going to sound different because I ran out at lunch while I was at work and bought another headset from the exchange. And we'll see how good it is. But here we go. So Toya, let me recalibrate. This episode. So one of these episodes has a lot of shit going on. So I don't remember exactly how it started. Oh, I remember now. Okay. So the lady that he rescued from the forest the other day, she's fully recovered. And he has a conversation with pink-haired alchemist lady about the whole situation. Apparently she's got amnesia, but her physical body's pretty good. So he goes and talks to her. She doesn't know her name or anything, so he decides to call her Sakura because she has beautiful pink hair. I know I said white in the previous episode, but I was incorrect because, I don't know, I don't pay that much attention to things as I should. Especially from reviewing them. But here we are. So, yeah. She's a good singer, and that comes up pretty quick. Toya's just like wandering around in the castle grounds, and she's singing, and he's like, oh, you got a beautiful voice. Then he takes her to like a piano that he has. I don't know if he brought the piano, because, you know, he like invented bikes in this world. So I'm not sure if he invented pianos too, but apparently he used to be a very good pianist. Again, Toya is good at everything as long as it's, you know, not played for humor. So of course he's good at piano. So they play and they sing, and then the waifus come in and they're like, oh, sing for us some more. So that's nice. Moving on with that, the next thing that comes up is the guild. One of the guild ladies comes and is like, hey, what's up, buddy? I need you to go kill a Calabrosis. It's like a bull that turns people into stone. It looks at them. It's like a pretty common, I would say a roughly common, like Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder style villain or monster. So he's like, yeah, for sure, I can definitely do that. A bunch of heroes tried to go do that, but they got turned to stone. That's okay, I got a recovery spell. That recovery spell is going to let me just be like, no stone for me. So he tells his wives about it. They want to come, so he's like, cool, let's do it. We also find out that that sword princess lady from the previous castle that he went and rescued from the phrases, her grandpa's the only other person in like recorded history or whatever that's ever killed one of these things before. So that's fun to know. It's important to know too, because he comes up later in this episode. Anyway, so they go, and then hilarity ensues because they take care of the monster pretty easily. But then first he gets hit with the stone attack, and so he loses his socks and shoes because apparently the stone spell doesn't just affect the person, it also affects the clothing they're wearing from the bottom up. And then princess number 2, wife, she gets hit, and it goes all the way up to her panties, so she loses her panties, and then, you know, hilarity ensues. And then another one shows up, so he goes and fights that one as well and kills that, so they get double the reward. And he's using the reward to buy materials to build more frame gears or whatever. And on that note, we go straight to the frame gear battles. And now we're still not fighting freezes or fresses or whatever they're called, but oh, okay. All right. Sorry, my phone fell, so I just want to make sure it's still recording. It is. Okay, sorry about that. So, the frame gears, the kings from the various kingdoms that he's friends with, like the animal kingdom and his 2 wives' kingdoms, and then the new kingdom with the guy who's younger, who he helped rescue their kingdom from the evil son-in-law, or the son who was not actually a son, is like the result of cheating and such. They're all there. They're all playing around with the gears, and then he promises to give them gears, and he thinks, hey, if I give them all gears, that'll be very helpful in the future because then I won't have to like be just my kingdom fighting the freezes when they come. Excellent. Good idea. Great idea. I'm the best. And then after that, we go to the sword princess, and she's sitting there looking at her beautiful sword, and then her grandpa shows up, and he's like, hey, so that's the sword. There's no way for us to like make it. It's very impressive that he can make this sword. And you heard about the other weapons? And she's like, what do you mean? And he's like, he's got these like mechanical beasts that you can ride in that are very impressive. And then he makes some like interesting comment about we have to figure out what to do about all this. And that's the end of the episode. So yeah, a bunch of random stuff. It's not really that interesting. Yep, that was it. Okay, cool. So Toya now has a visitor from the kingdom of something, the Night Kingdom, right? And he's kind of hanging out, just chilling. When he goes to meet with them. So the black-haired maid, who's like a ninja spy assassin lady, she comes with him, and they meet with the Night Princess. Oh, hey, she showed up. Who'd have thunk? Who'd have thunk that this very obvious fucking thing would have happened? Show. And she's here because she's escorting her grandfather, who is like the prior king and like the highest class adventurer and all this good stuff. And, you know, he's talking to him about stuff, and chit-chatting about, oh, I just wanted to come check out and see what the kingdom is all about and see what's going on. And I hear you guys have like these weapons that you're using. And he's like, oh yeah. I built a bunch to fight the Freeze. Don't worry, I'm not going to invade other nations. And like, my plan is to let other nations that I'm allied with kind of borrow them so we can all work together to destroy this threat that is probably coming. And he's like, oh, we should be allies. And he's like, yeah, that'd be great, man. I gotta check with like the whole alliance now, which is like a whole bunch of different kingdoms and crap, but I'm sure it'll be fine. And the guy's like, oh yeah, I'm not the king anymore, so I'll have to check with my son as well, but I'm sure he'll be okay with it. All right. So, sorry, I dropped my phone. Oh man. All right. Is this still recording? It is. All right. Just put that on my lap. Jeez. Very professional. So we, and at this point, he starts talking to the night princess lady, and then the grandpa, like, sneaks up and pervs on the assassin spy lady, and he's like, holy cow, he must be super talented and shit, because he's able to sneak up on this chick, and she's, like, an amazing spy and whatnot. So, yeah, there you go. Good stuff. Okay. So then he goes and shows them the frame gear, and they're very duly impressed by the whole situation. And then the night princess wants to battle the best warrior they have in the Brunhild, right, his kingdom, which is of course his samurai wife. So they have a little battle back and forth, and they're chit chatting and having a good time and being gal pals and all that stuff. And then, I forgot the other thing that happens at the very beginning is that Aphrodite shows up and is like they're sitting around, and then someone's like, hey, your sister's here. And he's like, my sister's here? And he's like, how? And then she rolls in and she's like, brother! And he's like, oh, it's you. Are you allowed to just like come down here or whatever? And then all the wives like say hi, and then they peace out. She's like, oh yeah, I was feeling kind of tired, and I need a recharge of like love. So I mean, you got more love than everybody because you got like 7 wives at this point, or 6 wives. So I figured I'd come down here and hang out with you. And you know what? I already feel better. This is great. And he's like, I feel very concerned about you being here. Rightfully so. And so the sister Aphrodite pops up again around this point and is like, ooh, so how long have you liked Toya for? And then the night princess is like, I don't like him, blush, and then her and the samurai girl, Aphrodite and the samurai girl, like, kind of guilt her into admitting that she does love Toya. And then they explain the whole, like, polyamorous situation there. I don't think it's even polyamorous, it's just polygamous. This polygamous situation that he's involved in, and all the other wives and everything. And she's like, oh my gosh. And they're like, it's cool, man, you should come with us and you should join. We got to ask the other wives to make sure, but I'm sure they'll be fine with it. And she's like, you know what? I do love Toya. I'll be number 7. And Aphrodite is like, yay. And Toya's like, yay. Jeez. The most unrealistic thing about this show. But before she can be engaged to Toya, the grandfather is like, before you can be engaged, you have to earn it, or there has to be like a challenge and you have to win. And then Toya's like, oh Lord, do I have to fight this guy? That's gonna suck. And he's like, I challenge you, night princess. And she's like, I will fight you, grandfather. And then they go have like the council of wives, and they're all chit chatting, and they're like, oh, we love you, you're great, you can definitely be a part of our like cohort of essentially, it's like a harem, and not like a fun Japanese harem. This is turned into a straight up like fucking caliphate harem. Like, he's like, this is my wife, the princess, and then these are my concubines, all 200 of them, and I have sex with whoever I want, whenever I want, and then they stay the fuck over there and do their own thing, and everyone's fine with it because of eunuchs who also pleasure them. Like, we're getting real close to this fucking thing. Anyway, and they're it's not just good because, why not have more fucking wives, but it's great because now we have an alliance. Now he's politically marrying 2 Western princesses and then an Eastern Kingdom princess. So great. Everything's great. So, but they're concerned because the night princess is like, there's no way I can beat my grandfather in battle. He's so good. There's like a small chance. And then they're like, oh, don't worry. Toya's going to cheat to make sure you win. So it'll all be good. And she's like, oh, okay, great. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like no morals whatsoever. Jeez. So then the battle commences, and yeah, the grandfather is much better than she is. He's so fantastic. And he's just kind of beating her up real good. And he's about to like deliver the final blow. They're fighting with like wooden swords. But Toya then uses like a sexy picture of a girl in like a string bikini from his phone to project over to where he's at so the grandpa gets like super distracted because he's like a horn dog, which is good writing because it established that earlier and then it stayed consistent. And he's like, ooh, and then the night princess gets up and knocks him down. And he's like, oh, Foley, I didn't get so distracted. And then the main wife, princess, is like, a girl in a string bikini, huh? Where'd you get that from? And Toya's like, I gotta go. And then he goes, and then the grandpa's like, where's that lady that was here? And in the bikini. And the night princess is like, what are you talking about? And Toya's like, all right, man, let's go. We can talk about this somewhere else. And he's like, oh, ho, 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 ho. And so they wander off. And all the wives get like very upset at Toya and talk about like, I can wear that outfit if I really wanted to. I mean, I'm not a whore or whatever, right? And so, yay. And so then the council of wives at this point is like having another council meeting. And Aphrodite shows up again to, feel all the love and stuff. Oh, that's right. The prior council of wives, Aphrodite showed up and like leached the sexual energy off the night princess. She talked about how she felt the first time she met Toya and the butterflies in her heart and all that stuff because she's some sort of like odd romantic vampire creature. Sure. So she shows back up to like hear more about everything. And then the night princess is like, I'm excited to meet Toya's parents. And then the other princesses, or the rest of the wives are like, oh yeah, none of us have met his mom or his parents. We just kind of assumed there was some weird thing going on with that. And then that's when Aphrodite shows up and she's like, oh, there is a secret thing about that. Ho, 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 ho. Let me tell you more. And they're like, ooh, do tell us more. And so she starts being like, the first time Toya fell in love, he was a little child. They're like, ooh. And then the cat who's with the main wife is like, oh no, I have to let Toya know this is happening. And he's like, I can't reach him. Why can't I reach him? And then the Aphrodite's looking at him and she goes, tee-hee. And he's like, fuck. Oh well, going to bed. And then the last shot is, and there's even a shot of, we have the fairy lady is talking to Sakura. And Sakura's like, what the fuck's going on over there? And then the elf lady's like, or the fairy lady's like, don't worry, you'll be a part of that soon enough. And that's when I face palmed. Jesus Christ. But fair, she's right. And then it ends with Toya hanging out with Sakura, his future number 8 wife, and he starts sneezing. And she's like, are you okay? And he's like, yeah. She's like, you got a cold? And he's like, no, I just think a certain sister is talking about me behind my back. The final episode of season 2 concentrates a lot on the wives of Toya. And it starts off, and the Firebird lady tells him that they found another teleportation thing for another Babylon Garden thingamabobber. And right before he's about to go, all his 7 wives show up, and they're all wearing like schoolgirl uniforms of different types. And he's like, what? Who told you to dress like that? And they're like, oh, don't you like whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, well, yeah, but who told you? And they're like, your sister. And he's like, fucking Aphrodite's. But, it's just like fan service for fan service sake. So moving on. So we go to the tower, it's literally the tower. So we go to the Garden of Babylon thing, and it's 2 of them combined. It's the rampart and the tower. I don't really understand. They didn't really go into like what those do exactly, except that the tower would be helpful in increasing the production of frame gears for reasons. So he meets the first lady. She's super chill. He's just like, hey, I already have all these other things. And she's like, all right, that's fine. You pass. And he's like, what about the rampart? And so they go find this girl. She's sleeping, so she needs food to wake up. So they wake her up using food because she's lazy and hungry all the time. And then she's like, I don't care. Give me food and I'll make you like the master of this part. And so then he does. So she kisses him. And then the other girl kisses him so long that he gets embarrassed and passes out or or something. And then she mentions that she was specifically made to satisfy night urges. Jesus. All right. Next, he's hanging out with all the wives, and he gets like an emergency note from the Tiger King, and it's a note from the King of Balphus, who is his main wife's and her little sister's father. And the baby's born, so he goes, and look, they had a prince. So now Toya is no longer going to inherit the kingdom there, which is good, because it's like one less thing he's got to worry about, so good for him. But they have this whole thing about that, and they have a whole thing about having babies, and all the wives are talking about having babies with Toya, and they're getting super excited about it. And then he's like, oh yeah, I never really thought about it before. That'll be interesting. And then he's talking to the like council of robots, and one of them mentions him having a lot of children with his 9 wives, and he's like, 9 wives? What do you? I only have 7. And they're like, oh yeah, but because what's her name? Her power, the other Isekai lady from like 5,000 years ago, her power was like clairvoyance, and also she left us like a clairvoyant. So we've seen that you have 9 wives and you have lots of children with them. And he's like, okay, cool. Just don't tell anyone else, okay? And then the other wives are all standing behind him, of course, and they're like, don't tell us what? And he's like, nothing. And so then the main wife demands that the robots tell him what they're talking about. And they're about to, and then Toya says, no. And then they like knock Toya out and drag him away. And they're like, tell us what you're going to tell him. And they're like, oh, there's going to be 9 wives. And they're like, And then we go to like the council of wives who are determining his verdict. And they talk about how they're not mad that he's going to have 9 wives because it hasn't happened yet. So they're not going to be mad at him for something that hasn't occurred yet. But they are mad at him because he was trying to keep secrets about their family and relationships. And so he's declared guilty by all of them. And he's like, okay, what's my punishment? Oh, and in the background, we have the fairy and the elf girl who was knocked out. Sakura, I think is what they call her. And they're just like they're like, the guys from the Muppets who like sit up in the theater and like laugh and like poke fun at everything. It's like they're making like more dry versions of that commentary. So they declare that he has to give a big smooch to each one of them so they can feel better about their relationship and themselves. And he doesn't want to do it there because they're supposed to be throwing like a big firework party for the birth of his future brother-in-law, the Prince of Balfus. And so they got to go do the fireworks and stuff. And they're like, okay, we'll get you later. And so they go and they have the fireworks show, and it's very pretty. And then the main princess wife rolls up, the 12-year-old, and is like, hey. And then she kisses him. And then the booby twin, the one with the big boobs, comes up, and she's like, not fair. And so she kisses too. And then the 8-year-old is like, my kiss. And then Toya does the only sensible thing to do with an 8-year-old and just gives her like a little peck on the cheek. Which is like, okay. Fair. And she's upset because she's an 8-year-old. But good. He's not making out. Granted, he's like 15. But still, it's gross. Anyway, so that's cute. And then the side, like the fairy and the elf come walking up, and they're like, oh, no. So then the other princess comes up, the green-haired one, and she's like, all right, my turn. And then she freaks out and runs away. And then the fairy and the elf come up, and they're like, oh, Brunhilde, or not Brunhilde, that's the name of the nation. The warrior princess wife is like passed out from thinking about it. And then the samurai girl's like, what about my kiss? Because if we recall, Toya's only kissed main princess and booby twin. And so he goes to kiss her, and she gets so embarrassed, she like throws him. And then the non-booby princess, or non-booby twin, comes up and helps him get up. And when she helps him get up, he like falls into kissing her. And then she gets so embarrassed, she punches him out. And then, everyone has a good laugh about that, I guess. So then the fireworks start, and he's like fulfilled his guilty charge, I guess. And so they're all standing there watching fireworks, all the wives, and then the fairy and the elf, and then Toya's standing behind him thinking about having wives and raising families and stuff, and he's like contented with life. We then go back to the androids, who they're ones in the flying cities throwing firework bombs down for everybody. And then when they finish their finale, Francesca, the first robot, comes out, and she's got the clairvoyance orb, and she's like, I want to look at this one more time. And all the robots are like, yeah. And so they all look at it, and we see that the 9 wives include, of course, the elf and the fairy. And the best part is that the main wife is wearing pink at the wedding, and everyone else is wearing white. So good stuff. And thus ends our time with season 2 of I got isekai'd into another world with my cell phone. And this season is an exact continuation of the first season. There was no quality improve or not disprove. There's no improvement or degradation on the quality, the humor, the writing, anything. It's like they just made them and separated them in 2 seasons and put them out. So what does that mean? That means that this anime, this isekai harem anime, which is like a 6 out of 10 for anime, which means it's like an 8 out of 10 for most things. Unfortunately, for most Western content that's come out in the last 20 years, like straight honest truth. Like, if I had to watch, if my choice was this or the entire like catalog of Disney Plus and HBO Max and Paramount and whatever else, but only for the last 10 years, I would just watch the show on repeat because the rest of that shit is so terrible and uninteresting. And this is at least somewhat humorous, And it has like a tiny bit of fan service. Oh, I forgot, in this last episode we also had a hot tub scene because fuck it. That is the only reason it exists. Fuck it, it's the last episode, why not? So what does that mean? That means that yes, I will watch season 3 if and when it comes out. I know how popular this is. I was kind of surprised that a season 2 came out. I'm like, is this really that popular? It's very mediocre if you like watch anime. Even if you watch like isekai harem anime, it's very like, yeah, this is fine. Like, I guess I'm trying to think if there's anything else like this would be the question, right? Because there's like other isekai animes where there's like love interest, but it's usually not so blatantly like, this is a harem anime, also isekai, also exactly what you think it is. Like, no surprises whatsoever. Let me think. Out of things I've seen, other kind of trashy stuff. Maybe not. Maybe this is like, it's filling a niche, like a very specific niche. But again, the quality of the animation's good. The voice work is fine. It's cute. All the girls are pretty, right? None of them are that interesting. The main character is not that interesting. Nothing that happens is that interesting. It's very like Saturday morning cartoon in that regard. Even though I can think of some like really badass Saturday morning cartoons when I was growing up. But it moves quick. I think that's the biggest thing for this. It's never bogged down. Like I've seen some stuff where like Rising of the Shield Hero is a good example. Like I will not watch any more of that. It is so slow and so boring. Like this show's kind of boring, but it like moves fast enough that it like I don't get bored, if that makes sense. Like looking back on it, I'm like, what happened in this fucking season? It's like we got some more islands, and they got the frame gears, and they had like 2 battles that were inconsequential. Well, it was consequential that they were able to make a weapon to defeat the Freeze, but that's it. The other battles are just kind of like things that exist. And again, it's like I couldn't really tell you the personalities. I mean, I could tell you the personalities of the wives, but it's like I could tell you them in like 2 or 3 words. Like, main princess is the boss. The 8-year-old is the cute one. The the samurai, well, the non-booby twin, and to a lesser extent the samurai are the tsundere. The the booby one is probably the best girl. The other princess is like a blank. Like I know nothing about her. She like existed. She got saved. She fell in love, and now she's around. I guess she's the other cute one. So we got 2 cute ones that have like no personality whatsoever. And then the warrior princess likes to fight. That's her personality. There's nothing else. They're all kind of like in love with Toya to the exact same level without any complications, and they all get along just great. Now the fairy is kind of more interesting because she's sardonic and sassy. And then the Sakura girl, she can sing. That's her personality. That's all I got. Like the robots have more personality than the wives. So there it is. All right, cool. So go ahead and like, share, subscribe, and comment. And yeah, there you go. I'm sure season 3 will show up someday, and I'll talk about that when it comes out. But yeah, this is all right. Nothing to rush out to see, but it's fine. Cool. Catch y'all later.